Funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by ODS Health Plan, the group medical plan that meets the needs of more than 600,000 Oregonians by providing a broad range of medical and dental coverage and responsive service.
Good evening. I'm Roger Mudd in New York.
And I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington. After our summary of the news this Thursday, we have excerpts from the House debate on the budget compromise, followed by analysis from Mark Shields, joined tonight by Cato Byrne and David Broder. Then we look at the State Department flap over U.S. Bosnia policy, and Jeffrey Kay reports on the sentencing of the two police officers in the Rodney King case.
Major funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by PepsiCo. PepsiCo. And by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by New York Life, yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
The budget debate moved to the floor of the House of Representatives today. The plan would cut some $496 billion from the budget deficit over 5 years. Democratic leaders predicted it will win approval sometime this evening, but they were reported to be scrambling for wavering votes. President Clinton did the same thing. Throughout the day, he phoned lawmakers lobbying for the bill's passage. Later, at a photo opportunity, he told reporters what he had been saying.
This is the beginning, not the end, of our efforts to have responsible budgeting. There will be one more round of budget cuts. There will be the unveiling of the Vice President's report on reinventing government, which will have billions of dollars in further savings that can be achieved. There will be the opportunity to control health care costs in the context of the health care reform bill in a way that will not be unfair to older people on Medicare. So what I'm suggesting to them is that this is clearly the best chance for real deficit reduction, for a fair apportionment of spending cuts and revenue increases, and for an economic plan that will grow the economy.
The House passed an earlier version of the bill by a 6-vote margin. Here's a sample of today's debate.
Mr. Speaker, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will face a big decision today. Should they vote for the largest retroactive tax increase in history, or should they vote for the American taxpayer? I feel like the Wendy's lady, you know, the one who opened up the hamburger and said, "Where's the beef?" Well, I open up the tax package and say, where are the spending cuts? There's no spending cuts. There's no beef, but there's plenty of pork. Now, shouldn't that go first?
The fact is, we have a plan that reduces the deficit by $496 billion, mainly through spending cuts, that restores tax fairness, and that lays a solid foundation for economic growth. There is no alternative before us that even comes close. This is the plan. This is the time. Let's get the job done.
The Senate is expected to vote tomorrow. We will have more from the House, plus some analysis right after this news summary. Roger?
The Senate has approved $5.8 billion in relief for the victims of the Midwest flooding. The bill passed last night is more than double the amount the president originally requested. The extra money would go to farmers for crop losses. The Senate bill must now be reconciled with a $3 billion version passed by the House last week. Although river levels were dropping in most of the Midwest, the Mississippi River was expected to crest today at the historic town of St. Genevieve, Missouri. Officials said the river would reach about 49 feet, just 2 feet below levees protecting the town. Workers spent the day reinforcing those levees to prevent them from being breached. There was some good news on the manufacturing sector in the economy today when the Commerce Department reported orders to U.S. factories jumped 2.6% in June. That was the best gain of the year for factory orders, which had declined in each of the 3 previous months.
A gunman opened fire at a federal courthouse in Topeka, Kansas today. A security guard was killed. 3 others were wounded. Police sealed off the building, and an FBI SWAT team was called in. But several hours later, they found the man inside, dead of a gunshot wound to the head. Before going in, he apparently set off a bomb in a parking lot outside. The man was identified as Jack Gary McKnight. He was to have been sentenced today on drug and firearms charges.
The Bosnian Serbs, under Western pressure, offered today to lift their siege of Sarajevo and open 2 key roads into the city. Serbian forces have besieged the city for more than a year and just yesterday said they had captured strategic high ground on Mount Igman overlooking the city. But the Serb leader, fresh from peace talks in Geneva, met just outside Sarajevo this morning with his top general and said their troops would withdraw from Mount Igman and another mountain seized this week. UN officials said the withdrawals would begin tomorrow. Bosnia's Muslim president boycotted the Geneva talks for 3 days because of the Serbian advance on Sarajevo, and NATO warned it would launch airstrikes to break the siege. The State Department's desk officer on Bosnia has resigned to protest U.S. policy in Bosnia. Marshal Freeman Harris today said he disagreed with the decision to use airstrikes, and he accused the Clinton administration of putting undue pressure on the Bosnian government to break up the country. We'll have more on that story later in the program.
Secretary of State Christopher will talk to NATO commanders about airstrikes against Serb positions in Bosnia. He is expected to hold those talks tomorrow at a U.S. airbase in Italy after finishing his Middle East trip. He claimed progress on that mission, which took him to Israel and Jordan today. We have a report narrated by Vera Frankel of Worldwide Television News.
Christopher arrived at Rabin's office after meeting the chief Palestinian negotiator, Faisal Husseini. Christopher is trying to break the deadlock in Palestinian-Israeli talks on interim self-government for the Palestinians. This was Christopher's second meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister in 2 days. The most important item on the agenda was the outcome of Christopher's talks in Damascus the previous day with President Hafez Assad. Syria had asked for more active U.S. mediation in the peace process. Rabin said the news from Damascus was encouraging.
I believe that you have brought certain good news. It's only the beginning. We still have a long way to go. I appreciate your efforts and thank you very much.
I don't want to get into the substance of any of the discussions. I'll simply say that I think it's accurate that the peace process has been salvaged and is back on track.
Christopher's next stop was Amman, Jordan. His meeting with King Hussein was largely a diplomatic courtesy. It's believed the only obstacle to an announcement of Jordanian-Israeli agreement is Jordan's hesitation to go ahead before the Palestinians and Israelis agree. Back in Israel, Christopher confirmed he would revisit Damascus on Friday to help bridge the gap between Israeli and Syrian positions.
2 more American soldiers were wounded in Somalia today. Officials said their convoy was ambushed by Somali gunmen about 50 miles west of Mogadishu. The area is controlled by warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid, who remains a fugitive from UN forces. There have been 7 U.S. casualties in Somalia in the past 2 days.
2 huge explosions killed about 70 people in the southern Chinese city of Shenzhen today. Officials said the first blast was at a shipping company. It ignited fires in at least 8 warehouses where explosives were stored. More than 200 people were injured. Many were firefighters caught in the second explosion as they helped victims from the first.
And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to the budget vote in the House, U.S. Bosnia policy, and the Los Angeles sentences. The first of 2 final rounds in the fight over the budget plan is being fought as we speak. It is happening in the House of Representatives, which will vote later tonight. The Senate is to do it tomorrow. Our coverage begins with the debate on the House floor. Kwame Holman reports.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Aside from reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, the only bipartisan moment in the House today came when New York Democrat Michael McNulty announced that 2 of his Republican colleagues, Susan Molinari and Bill Paxton, also from New York, had gotten engaged on the House floor.
I want to join with all of my colleagues in wishing them the best of health and happiness.
But soon after the applause died down, so did the family atmosphere, and Democrats and Republicans resumed their feud.
Isn't there some aspect of the axe killer here who smears in blood on the bathroom windows? Stop me before I tax again.
Don't be swayed by the guardians of gridlock who are still being led by the failed policies of the just say no, just do nothing Republican administrations of Ronald Reagan and George Bush.
This budget is the first step on a path of economic recovery which will lead to a better quality of life for all Americans.
Mr. Speaker, I know a lot of our Democratic colleagues believe the president needs their vote today to save his job. Well, I hope you remember that to save the president's job, the price will be the lost jobs of millions of working Americans.
This is wrong-headed plan. Go back and start over again.
This is the plan. This is the time. Let's get the job done.
Has expired.
New York's Gerald Solomon, the ranking Republican on the Rules Committee, had a specific complaint. Democrats were trying to waive the rule requiring a 48-hour waiting period between the time a bill is filed with the House clerk and the time when debate on it can begin.
Who has had time to read this? This. Look at that. Several thousand pages. Not one member knows what he's voting on here today.
Badly outnumbered, the Republicans lost that battle and even were denied a victory on a simple voice vote.
Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. No! Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, as a good Marine, I would expect better of that, but I would object to that vote on the grounds that are object to the vote.
Objection.
The vote to forego the 48-hour rule fell along strict party lines, and the House then moved toward a final vote on the budget bill.
The American people elected Bill Clinton to lead and change the direction of our country. The president has faced that responsibility squarely and asks us to support this plan. My friends, now is the time to govern. The president has my vote. He deserves your vote. Adopt this conference report.
We feel passionate about defeating this plan, not because any of us have an interest in hurting the President of the United States, because we want to have partisan political gain. That is not the reason why the Republicans have been so passionate. The reason why we've been so passionate is we believe that this program of massive tax increases, devastating cuts in national security, no real cuts until the last 2 years of this program, no control of federal spending, a bigger federal government. What we're concerned about is that prescription will wreck the economy.
Part of the Republican argument was that they had public opinion on their side.
10,000 signatures from one city in one county in my district against this package. The American people are against the largest tax increase in history.
But Democrat David Obey of Wisconsin argued Republicans had managed to manipulate public opinion through a campaign of disinformation.
And you ought to be ashamed of yourselves for some of the misinformation that you and your political allies are peddling in this country in the name of free speech. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Freedom of speech gives you the right to say anything you want. But if you got a conscience, you'll at least keep it honest.
4 of the 38 Democrats who voted no on the budget last time now say they'll support the president's plan. But Ohio's James Traficant won't be one of them.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a Democrat. I helped to elect Bill Clinton. His heart's in the right place. But I wasn't elected to blindly support any president or turn my voting card over to the Democrat Party. It's our tax policy. It's a failure. It's killing America, and I'm voting no. And I'm urging every member to vote their conscience today.
But despite the defections, it appeared the president would have enough votes to win in the House tonight and move on to the Senate tomorrow.
Now some analysis of that situation tonight. It comes from our regular syndicated columnist Mark Shields, joined tonight by Washington Post political reporter David Broder and Kate O'Byrne of the Heritage Foundation. She's a contributing editor of the magazine, The National Review. The president have the votes in the House?
As of this moment, no. I think it's a tough fight for the president right now. All stops are being pulled out, but there's no 218.
How close? I mean, it's close, though, right?
It's close, but it's a long reach from here. I mean, This is the hard part of the road.
What's going wrong for him in the House, David?
The plan is not popular back home. If you're going to boil it down to one thing, the atmosphere up there is quite remarkable. Jim, I've spent the afternoon there. The Republicans are relaxed, they're nonchalant. Their attitude is they've had their fun. They've made their point. From their viewpoint, it's sold the message that it's a tax plan. They don't much care at this point whether it passes or fails. The Democrats are really sweating. An hour ago, I was with Bill Richardson, the chief deputy whip, and he said we've got 24 people, not all of one stripe, not all freshmen, some of them subcommittee chairmen, some liberals, some conservatives, and we can't find a way to satisfy them all.
You're nodding in agreement, Kate.
Yeah, I was up there for a few hours, too, and I found the same thing. The Republicans are practically buffing their nails, you know, and there's a man scurrying on the other side of the aisle. When President Clinton went on TV on Tuesday night, it may have been a mistake. I mean, I often thought that this plan is going to be sold inside the Beltway. It's going to be deals, it's going to be talking to members, it's going to be trying to buy votes. The Republicans report that following his appeal and Bob Dole repeating the Capitol Hill switchboard phone number, millions of calls came into the switchboard. The Republicans report 86% against the plan. The Democrats say, well, mine are running sort of 50-50. What happened, I think, is they started hearing from an awful lot of constituents who don't want the plan. It may not have been a good idea to go on nationwide TV on Tuesday night and stir up the grassroots and urge them to call in if you're not convinced that they're going to be getting the right message into Washington. And I think that's what some of those members are now responding to.
Well, speaking of the right message, Mark, what about David Obey's charge that that this thing has been misrepresented, that the Republicans successfully got the word out that this is a tax bill rather than a deficit reduction package?
Well, it is a tax bill. I mean, you know, the Republicans can't be criticized for calling it a tax bill. It is a tax bill. It's a pretty good-sized tax bill. I mean, usually when it comes to that, and David Obey is a loyal Democrat and a fierce partisan in 24 years in the House, but usually it comes to that, it's sort of an admission that you guys have won the debate to this point. Part of the other problem I don't think that can be ignored here, Jim, is that an awful lot of the defections, an awful lot of the Democrats who aren't supporting the plan come from those 50 congressional districts that George Bush carried last fall. I mean, Bill Clinton is trying to offer a bold, ambitious, almost historic program on a very thin reed of 43%. And he only ran ahead of the Democratic winning congressional candidate in 13 districts in the whole country. Contrast that with Ronald Reagan, who won 377 of the 435 congressional districts. It's a big difference. There's a pragmatic political factor in this whole equation.
David, why does this, your newspaper on its editorial page, the New York Times on its editorial page, the Detroit, many newspapers and others have said, hey, Democrats, this is your opportunity to govern. You must demonstrate to the country that you can govern, and that means you have to pass this plan. Why is that falling on so many deaf ears of Democrats?
If the plan passes tonight, it will be simply because of that argument, because the prospect of failing to back the president on a measure in which he has invested now 5 months of his time and an enormous percentage of his political prestige and capital. The prospect of that failing scares even some of the Democrats. They don't want to be the one who brings it down. But on the other hand, these are scared folks. I talked to a member today up there who said, maybe this is a fourth termer. He said, maybe I've been around this place too long, but I wasn't of the view that we were elected just to cast easy votes. But listening to my colleagues, they don't want to cast a tough vote.
Yeah. It seems to me that the president sort of gave his Democratic colleagues a choice, you know, in the House. We've seen this play out, either suicide or regicide. And some of them are willing to take a risk and to cast that tough vote rather than kill the king 7 months into his term. On the other hand, they're not the most selfless group of individuals, and as much as they care about President Clinton's political fortunes, they tend to care about their own to quite an extent, too. And I think at the nth hour, that's what's beginning to happen.
And is it that clean, Kate, to most of these people that a vote for this bill means that they are going to lose re-election? I mean, is that how they see it?
Many of them do. I think, well, for one thing is the attitude of the Republicans. They look at their colleagues across the aisle who are looking rather smug. There are some Republicans hoping this thing passes by a 40-vote margin. You know, I mean, they really do, because they're being partisan. They think it'll make 40
I
other
think Kate is exactly right. And the reason, one of the reasons that it won't pass by more than 5 votes is that there are not that many volunteers, and they're going to give a pass to anybody who is saying, I can't stand it, you know, can't take the heat.
Eight or nine of the Democrats who are not supporting the president as of this moment are from Texas. Texas was a bad state for Bill Clinton. It's been a worse state since then, since the Kay Bailey Hutchison crushing victory over Bob Kruger, the appointed Democrat. So that's part of it.
Won't they be running with Ann Richardson?
They'll be running next year. They'll be running next year as part of a national Democrat. As a national Democrat. There's going to be a national consensus, a national agenda in the campaign of 1994. Democrats won't be able to do what they've been able to do successfully in off years, really, for the past quarter century, with the exception of 1978. And that is to move away and to be the counterpoint to a conservative White House that is trying to, or allegedly going to trim Social Security, be cruel to widows and orphans. Now the Democrats are part of the governing party with a governing record to defend. Republicans, by contrast, are free for the first time, really, since 1978. They've had to defend in off years Republican presidents and their policies against Democrats who are generally more skillful than Republicans at winning elections. And I think that's going to be a real problem for 1994.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to, don't you think, too, what the Republicans are talking up an awful lot are the wins they've had since January. The Democrats don't think this president is popular enough to give them cover. You need cover if you're going to cast an unpopular vote. And they point to lots of things. They point to Hutchison's huge win in Texas. They point to the lieutenant governor in Arkansas, a Republican winning for the 4th time in this century statewide.
Yeah,
exactly. They point to the legislative races in Missouri. I said to somebody in Dick Gephardt's backyard, a Republican won. And somebody said, no, it was Dick Gephardt's kitchen, not a Republican won. The Republicans are talking it up a lot, and more Democrats are realizing he's not politically popular enough to give us the cover we might need, because Republicans have won races that they were not expected to since January.
So, David, in a nutshell, one of the word that's always thrown around a lot, but with very little meaning, a courageous vote. This, for many Democrats, is in fact a courageous vote. If some Democrat casts a vote tonight in favor of this bill, knowing full well that back home he or she is going to suffer in the neck for this, that's tough. That's a tough go.
I was told that if you had a secret vote in the Senate, now we're talking about the Senate, not the House, that there would probably be about 20 Democrats who would vote for this on its merits. The reason that they will vote for it is that they do not want to bring the president down. And it really comes very flat to that question.
Yeah. Freshman Karen Shepard, who was on our broadcast last night,
from Utah,
for a Democrat from Utah, will probably is going to support the president. She comes from a district where Bill Clinton got 31% of the vote, where she won with 50.5. Wow. You want to do a PS on profiles in courage, or, you know, reckless behavior, or however you want to call it, but I mean, it really is not the easy vote, certainly, would be to go the other way.
She's going to spend the rest of her time explaining this because somebody also pointed out there's not enough time, really, between now and the election for this thing to really show whether it works or not. I mean, let's say it's hugely successful. It'll be too late to help these people. Is that correct?
That's why the speech, I think, I disagree a little bit with Kate about the speech. I think that the speech didn't work. I think what the speech had to do was to give a sense to the country. There is no stimulus package. This has to be the stimulus package. There has to be a good feeling come out of this. There has to be optimism generated. Right now, there isn't. There's a fatalism. There's a sense, geez, if I'm going to do this, this could be my political life. And these Democrats are pretty glum and pretty fatalistic about it. And if the president the other night could have put the sense, you do this, and we're on the march. America's on the move again, and it's going to be better. I think, in that case, you could have made the case going in 1994 that we are moving.
But Kate, Mark Shields and others made the case on this program the other night, or tried to make the case at least, that the only thing worse than Bill Clinton the other night was Bob Dole in terms of making it. But apparently the public listened to him more than they did Bill Clinton. Is that what you're saying?
I think they have the relentless characterization of this plan since February. When the president first unveiled it, it had a boost. The American public supported it.
That was a February speech.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Relentlessly, the Republicans have been successful in labeling it as a tax and spend plan. Not a huge challenge because of the Democrats' image as a tax and spend, you know, the party of tax and spend-aholics. And so notwithstanding his particular performance on Tuesday night, relentlessly they're repeating the same message, and it is working out there.
David, if it does pass the House tonight and goes to the Senate, you've been watching the Senate very closely these last few days. Has he got the votes there? Has Bob Kerrey decided to go, or what, or stay?
Anybody who will tell you from breakfast to dinner whether Bob Kerrey is a braver person than I am. I'm not sure that he knows where he is.
Well, I heard today that, I mean, the Wire said that he was quoted, one of his aides said he isn't going to make his mind up till the very last minute.
I can believe that. What is happening and designed for the Senate side is that there will be some kind of a statement coming out of the White House promising that in September, the president will come forward with a new set of spending cuts, rescissions, to use the Washington jargon. And they hope that with a kind of an orchestration, perhaps, of a White House summit on spending cuts, will be enough to bring Senator Kerry aboard.
And that's
but they
designed
don't,
just for him?
It's designed very much
They're
for
tailoring
him.
lots of, this is a designer bill. They're tailoring an awful lot for individual members. You know what Ronald Reagan's doing in retirement in L.A., though? He's waiting for the spending cuts they promised him in 1982. He was supposed to get $3 of spending cuts for every dollar new taxes, and the poor man's still waiting. But if it works, I suppose, for Bob Kerry, it works. What the Republicans are hoping for is a 50-50 split in the Senate. You have a 50-50 split, and each individual senator was responsible for that plan. You know, I mean, each one of them is individually responsible, and that's what they're hoping for.
You have a good memory, Mark. Has there ever been anything like this where individual senators have become so much in the spotlight, either positively or negatively, whatever your view is, and wield so much power? David wrote a column about it.
Well, David's piece on Dennis DeConcini
and Herbert Cole.
And Herbert Cole in particular, but Dennis is the piece on Dennis DeConcini and the Panama Canal.
Right.
And the parallel is this. In both cases, it was a president who failed to make the wholesale case. He didn't make the case to the nation in favor of his position. Therefore, you're down to retailing. And when you're down to retailing, you go one by one. And when you're dealing with senators, you're dealing with people who think they ought to be on Mount Rushmore. Every time they shave, they see that president in the mirror. And you're dealing with enormous egos that have to be mollified and satisfied.
Let me ask something, though. In retrospect, the plan was apparently, at Vice President Gore's advice, was you don't need the Republicans. We'll work with just our Democrats. Now, of course, they were counting Bob Kruger. They didn't leave themselves from the beginning much of a margin. In retrospect, shouldn't they have tried to fashion a package that the Republicans, and there's a sentiment on that side of the aisle, for increasing taxes in the name of deficit reduction, and then not every single Democratic senator is such a deal breaker.
David, what you're reading?
They might have tried that, but I have to say that the way this thing has developed, Kate, I'm not sure that the Republicans were prepared to play ball. There are Republicans who in the past have been very conscientious about the budget deficit, have made courageous votes to cut the budget deficit. But I haven't seen those folks stepping up to it this year.
Since 1985, really.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you all very much. We'll see what happens.
Still ahead, the dust-up on our Bosnian policy and reaction to the Los Angeles police sentencing. Now we take up the Bosnian story. The United States and its reluctant European allies are preparing for possible airstrikes on Serbian positions around embattled Sarajevo. Talks between Bosnian Muslims, Serbs, and Croats over the future of Bosnia are supposed to resume on Monday. And in Washington, a second mid-level State Department official has resigned in protest against American policy. Our coverage begins with a report from Sarajevo from Ian Williams of Independent Television News.
These are the new Serb positions on Bijelešnica, one of the strategic peaks overlooking Sarajevo. This is the first evidence that Serb forces have taken the area, which sits just to the west of Mount Igman, which they have also captured. Their guns are quiet, though trained on Bosnian positions below. These troops are not preparing to withdraw. For that reason, the UN commander, General Brickmont, went to the Bosnian Serb headquarters in Pale this morning to meet their leader, Dr. Karadzic, and his army chief, who yesterday said his troops would stay put. Karadzic sought to distance himself from General Mladic.
Well, generals are generals, they are not politicians. They should not be as politicians, as politicians should not be as generals.
Then he came up with his own offer.
And we are ready to hand over all of strategic points around Sarajevo to the UN.
If the UN agrees to put people on the strategic point, you'll withdraw from it?
Yes.
Including Mount Igman?
Yes.
The UN has become wary of such offers from Dr. Karadzic, but after 5 hours of talks, an agreement was struck for the Serbs to withdraw from the heights around the capital, handing them over to the UN. It remains to be seen if the Bosnian Serbs are good to their word, though, and if it is enough to bring the government in Sarajevo back to the peace talks. As the meeting took place, NATO fighters were again screaming low over Sarajevo and surrounding Serb positions. This week, they seem to have caused more concern to General Brickman and his UN colleagues than to the Bosnian Serbs. Until a month ago, General Francis Brickman headed the Belgian armed forces in Germany. He worked for NATO. Now he's angry at his old colleagues in Brussels. All week he's been engaged in endless shuttle diplomacy between the military leaders of the warring factions here. And the UN in Sarajevo believes American-led NATO threats of airstrikes are undermining their delicate attempts to patch together a ceasefire. Brickman has been trying to persuade General Delic, who commands the Bosnian government forces, to return to the negotiating table. But Delic refuses to talk to the Serbs until they withdraw from the strategic heights around Sarajevo. The UN thinks he's been encouraged by President Clinton's threats to bomb the Serbs, and this meeting failed. At UN headquarters in Sarajevo, Brickman's closest advisor is his British Chief of Staff, Brigadier Vere Hayes.
So what we need to do is get the remaining comments in.
Both men believe the immediate threat to humanitarian efforts comes not from the Serb capture of Igman, but from the Bosnian government offensive in central Bosnia, which is holding up vital convoys. Their frustration boiled over at a press conference given by the Brigadier late last night.
There are 6 fuel tankers waiting to come to Sarajevo. They are not getting in. The reason they are not getting in is because of the fighting in central Bosnia. And that fighting is a Bosnian offensive around Gornji Bakuf, which is aimed at getting some key terrain around the area of Prozor. That is what is strangling humanitarian aid getting into Sarajevo at the moment. It is not the Serb offensive on Mount Igman that is stopping humanitarian aid. It is only blocking the military lines into Sarajevo.
The fuel shortage is already threatening the limited amount of clean water being pumped in the city. With the mains supply cut, diesel-powered pumps have been set up at an old brewery. It is the most important source of drinking water, but has only days' supply of fuel left. That, in turn, is threatening to cripple the biggest hospital in Sarajevo, Koševa.
The lack of fuel here has very serious repercussions for health. In the first place, it means that the surgeons cannot operate, the X-ray department cannot work, but secondly, in the end, it means it's impossible to pump water which is fit to drink. There is now an unprecedented plan to reduce the number of beds from 1,850 to 500, and this will cut down the services available to the people of this city to an unacceptable minimum.
Koševa is already stretched and chronically short of vital medical supplies. The planned cuts come as the UN prepares to announce a big program to bring in supplies for winter, a program they believe must be started within the next week, but which is impossible while fighting continues in central Bosnia. All of which fuels deep skepticism here about the value of airstrikes. Senior UN officials complain privately of not being consulted by Washington or the UN in New York. They say the knock-on effects on the aid effort and the safety of UN personnel here have not been properly considered.
At the State Department, the Bosnian war has taken its own toll. A year ago, a State Department desk officer for the Balkans resigned in protest against the Bush administration policy. Now, the Bosnian desk officer at the department has quit in protest against the Clinton administration policy. The official, Marshall Freeman Harris, sent in his letter of resignation yesterday and today took a job with Democratic Congressman Frank McCluskey of Indiana, an advocate of a stronger U.S. policy in Bosnia. They held a news conference on Capitol Hill.
I disagree with the policy, and the policy is that we are prepared to use airstrikes now in Bosnia, not merely to punish the Bosnian Serbs who were guilty of genocide and brutal aggression in that country, but to use those strikes as a means of compelling a political settlement in Geneva, a political settlement that will inevitably lead to the partitioning of Bosnia. My concern here mainly is that while the administration, first of all, has treated Bosnia as a footnote in its domestic policy agenda rather than as a legitimate foreign policy concern. As I say, the partitioning of a European state should be of vital concern to us here, but the administration has lacked the political will to do more. I think that what they've done so far I could characterize as half measures, as would be the airstrikes that are being contemplated now. President Clinton has never directly and actively engaged in Bosnia policy. He has written letters to his counterparts. He's discussed the issue when asked with the media, but it seems to me he needs to be far more forceful and assert himself as a leader of the world's superpower, and he should act accordingly. And it seems to me maybe they're going about things backwards, that if he were to lead, that would bring the American public along. That would bring along the congressmen who are reluctant to do anything, and it could inspire our European allies to do more.
Do you think the administration has the political strength to both pass a budget bill and embark on a more vigorous Bosnian strategy?
I think the administration would be surprised what it could accomplish if it confronts this issue head-on. When it adopts a defeatist mode, as it has in Bosnia, now being willing to accept the partitioning, it's going to get defeatist results. I think if it asserts itself and does so strongly, it would be amazed at how much support it could find.
Joining us now to discuss the questions raised by Marshall Harris and U.S. policy in general is Stephen Oxman, the Assistant Secretary of State for European and Canadian Affairs. This past Monday, Mr. Oxman led the U.S. delegation at a NATO meeting in Brussels, where the Allies met on the use of airstrikes against Serbian positions around Sarajevo. Good evening, Mr. Secretary.
Good evening, Roger. Nice to be here.
Secretary of State Christopher, when asked about the desk officer's letter of resignation, said simply, he's a young officer. Certainly the department has a better answer than that, doesn't it?
Well, Marshall's a mid-level officer, a very hard-working officer who chose to resign, and we certainly respect his decision. I think the key issue is, what is the new initiative? What is the focus of our policy?
And may I ask one other question? He said in his letter or at the press conference today that while the State Department was not in turmoil over the Bosnian policy, there was a widespread dissent. Is that a correct characterization?
I wouldn't characterize it that way. This is a very tough situation, and a lot of people have worked many, many long hours on it, many months, and it puts a lot of pressure on people. It's a difficult situation, but I wouldn't characterize it in that way, really.
What about some of the questions that he raised in his letter? For instance, he said that the airstrikes, the possible use of airstrikes, too little, too late, generally designed to assuage our guilt for earlier inaction, and that those airstrikes were designed, he said, to put pressure on Bosnia to accept its own partition.
Well, this is a major new initiative by President Clinton, and the purpose of it is to say that if the Bosnian Serbs continue their effort to strangle Sarajevo and other areas in Bosnia, that NATO will be prepared to use air power to stop that. Now, the purpose of that is both to address the humanitarian situation in Sarajevo and to reinforce the negotiating process. Our goal is a negotiated solution, and it's our hope that this warning will cause the Serbs to moderate their conduct, stop the strangulation of Sarajevo, and will reinforce the negotiating process.
And that, you hope, will pave the way for the Bosnian acceptance of its partition?
Our position is that this is a dispute that needs to be resolved through the negotiating process. We're not taking any particular position on the particular issues being negotiated. We do support the continued existence of a Bosnian state. They've agreed on constitutional principles earlier this week which seem to preserve a Bosnian state with 3 pieces to it. We are waiting to see what the parties agree. If they come to a viable agreement with enforcement provisions that they enter into in good faith, then we're going to be prepared to participating in helping to implement it.
Is U.S. policy now not to protect the continued sovereignty of the state of Bosnia-Herzegovina?
No, we think there should be a recognition of the continuation of the state of Bosnia, and that seems to be what they've incorporated into their constitutional principles earlier this week.
What, Mr. Secretary, do you make of today's offer by the Serbs to lift the siege of Sarajevo and open up 2 roads into the city? As far as we know, it's only an offer. Can you illuminate any more?
Well, we are getting fragmentary reports about that, and we're looking at it very closely. It could be a significant development. As you know, President Izetbegovic has said that unless this activity around the heights outside of Sarajevo stops, he may not stay engaged in the negotiating process. So we're looking at that very closely, and we're hopeful that the reports are right and that they would carry through on the agreement. In this situation, we're always a bit skeptical. There have been many agreements entered into in Bosnia that have not been carried through on.
But would the opening of just 2 roads into Sarajevo be enough to in effect, call off the airstrikes? What would it take, for instance, to stop the airstrikes?
Well, this is going to be a judgmental question. We've said that if the strangulation of Sarajevo does not stop, then NATO will be prepared to use airstrikes. Now, that strangulation has taken many forms. There's been shelling, there's been a cutoff of water and electricity and fuel. There's been an impeding of the distribution of food from the airport into the city. The food comes in through the airlift and then it can't be distributed into the city. These are a number of the dimensions of the problem. We'll see whether, in light of this warning, the Bosnian Serbs stop this activity and permit the food to be distributed. We'll see whether the shelling stops. And over the last couple of days, interestingly, the shelling seems to have subsided very greatly. These are the factors that will be looked at. The NATO Council will be meeting again early next week, and they will look at that. They'll also look at what the status is in the negotiations, and then a judgment will be made.
But really, it'll be the United States that's the tail that wags the dog on the airstrikes, isn't it? I mean, the U.S. will be calling when and how many and which targets?
No, Roger, this will be a NATO, this is a NATO initiative. We were very gratified that the NATO allies unanimously supported the President's proposal, which he made last Friday, that NATO should undertake this exercise. And the NATO Council will review the factors I mentioned, and that decision will be made in NATO with our allies.
If the shelling stops, but the Serbs simply remain in position on those heights overlooking the city and the roads are opened up, do you think generally that's sufficient, or do you expect a withdrawal? And what happens to Sarajevo?
Well, I don't want to speculate on the exact conditions. I think we'll know it when we see whether this strangulation effort has stopped. I mean, the conditions there are really outrageous, particularly the water situation. The best judgment is that people need 12 liters of water per day just to have a minimal existence, and that if they don't have more than 2.5, they will die. Well, the people in Sarajevo, our best judgment is they're getting 4 liters of water per day. So this is a very tough situation. So we'll know, we'll make a judgment on whether the strangulation of the city and of other areas in Bosnia has stopped. And we're hopeful that this warning from NATO, very serious matter, will be enough to have that effect.
What makes you so sure that airstrikes won't simply derail the negotiations?
Well, we are, as I said, very, very committed to seeing the negotiating process succeed. We feel this situation needs to have a negotiated solution. At the same time, we can't sit back and watch Sarajevo, the capital of what would be the Bosnian entity in this new Bosnian state, simply be strangled. We're hopeful that by taking the measure we did, the Serb conduct will moderate, will stop. The negotiating process can be preserved so the Bosnian Muslims aren't presented with a situation where they're being forced to capitulate. That's the theory of the action, and we'll see what effect it has.
Do you foresee the possibility of Sarajevo becoming a city under a UN trusteeship? What's to protect it?
Well, I wouldn't speculate on a UN trusteeship. What's to protect it? Right now, it's not getting much protection. The UNPROFOR forces, the UN forces, have done heroic work in Sarajevo and elsewhere in Bosnia. But the fact is that the presence of the UNPROFOR forces has not prevented the strangulation process on this city. So our approach is, let's see if we can address this in a different, more forceful way, see if this can stop the process, address the humanitarian situation in the city, and at the same time, promote the chances of a negotiated solution in Geneva.
Do you acknowledge, Mr. Secretary, as my final question, that the Clinton administration's policy toward Bosnia has been rather difficult to follow and figure out for the layman?
Well, I think I don't agree with that. I think if you look at the track record of President Clinton and the administration since he came into office, he's done a lot. He engaged on this problem much more so than the prior administration. This was a problem we inherited. We were the ones who led the way in airdrops of food into eastern Bosnia. We attached a senior negotiator, Ambassador Reg Bartholomew, one of our best diplomats, to the negotiations. We were the ones who sought to lift the arms embargo, a very forward-looking, forward-leaning effort, a difficult effort. We were not able to get agreement on that. We are the ones. President Clinton made this new initiative last Friday, and he's gotten the NATO allies unanimously to support it. So I think the record shows a very, very engaged approach, one that's designed at trying to achieve a negotiated solution in an activist way, not just sitting back.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Mr. Secretary.
Nice to see you, Roger. Thank you.
Now, a report on reaction in Los Angeles to yesterday's sentencing in the Rodney King case. The two officers found guilty of violating King's civil rights in the 1991 beating were sentenced to 2.5 years in jail. Jeffrey Kay of public station KCET Los Angeles reports.
There will be no fine.
Yesterday morning, TV sets all over Los Angeles were tuned to one of the final episodes in the Rodney King beating saga. Martin de la Rosa watched with special interest. He served on the federal jury which convicted the two officers of violating King's civil rights. And he was surprised when Judge John Davies pronounced the sentences. 30 months in prison, 2 years probation.
I feel pretty strongly that it's very lenient on Judge Davies' behalf.
Too lenient?
Yeah, a little too lenient. I figured, for myself, this is just my opinion, it would be 5, accounting for the 2 years that the officers have been going through this, for the hardship.
Officer Lawrence Powell and Sergeant Stacy Kuhn could have received 10-year maximum sentences. Prosecutor Stephen Clymer argued for minimum prison terms of 7 years, calling the 1991 incident brutality which horrified the country. But Judge Davies said this case was atypical, and he departed from sentencing guidelines. He described his reasoning in detail, frequently referring to the videotape of the beating. Davies said King, quote, contributed significantly to provoking the offense behavior, unquote, by the officers, because King, who was drunk, refused to comply with officers' commands and tried to flee after a high-speed car chase. The judge said that King contributed significantly to provoking the officers' behavior.
Well, he may have, but I don't see any reason why he would want to use King's behavior to contribute to the way that the officers acted towards him.
King's most serious injuries, according to Judge Davies, occurred at the beginning of the beating. Those blows were legal, said Davies, who determined the officers should only be punished for about 6 baton strikes committed when police crossed the line from legality to illegality. Disappointed prosecutors said they were exploring a legal challenge to the sentences. Terry Bowers is the U.S. Attorney in Los Angeles.
We will be consulting with the Attorney General of the United States and the Solicitor General to evaluate the district court's analysis of the case and to decide whether or not to seek appellate review of the judge's decisions.
The defendants were publicly mute. Kuhn stood stoically as his lawyer, Ira Saltzman, called the sentences neither a victory nor a defeat.
So considering the uphill struggle we faced in this matter, I'm certainly very heartened that Judge Davies, as I was confident he would not succumb to the less responsible members of our community to just be vengeful. This was not a racial incident. The needless and continued repetition of 4 white officers and a black defendant who was supposedly a motorist when he was not just a mere motorist can be put to rest.
But outside the courthouse, the racial implications of the incident were very much in evidence.
And it was not a fair trial. It was a fair trial. It was a fair trial.
What am I supposed to tell my community? What am I supposed to tell my people? To believe in a system that really doesn't care for you, that isn't concerned about your well-being, that isn't going to protect you when you need protecting?
At City Hall, newly elected L.A. Mayor Richard Riordan called for healing.
Our judicial system worked. Maybe not the way many of us would like to have it work, but it did work.
Police officers we interviewed weren't so sure. They expressed sympathy for Kuhn and Powell and concern for the department's tarnished image.
I don't think they should have done any time at all.
None at all.
I really don't think so. Basically what we're trying to do with sentencing someone is to protect the public and to rehabilitate somebody. And I don't think the chances of this ever reoccurring again, or what term I'll use here, I just don't think it'll ever occur again.
I used to work for Sergeant Kuhn in 77th Division. I was working there the night he saved the life of another officer. The suspect was trying to sneak up behind him with an AK-47 and kill him. He was within feet of him when Sergeant Kuhn fired, injuring the suspect, forcing him to drop the rifle. I have my own opinion about what happened out there. I have my own opinion about Sergeant Kuhn. Generally a favorable one. I liked him. And to see him go 30 months in a federal prison is a very difficult thing for us.
These police officers also said that many of the reforms promised in the wake of the King beating have simply not materialized. And lawyer Solzman feels that sending his client off to prison won't prevent another Rodney King beating.
One of the tragedies of this case is that nothing has changed. The city has learned nothing. LAPD management has learned nothing. Recently on a show, an assistant chief says, morale problem? What morale problem? I don't know what morale means. I mean, that's the type of head-in-the-sand denial that has occurred and is ongoing right now. So yes, tonight, tomorrow, an officer from Southeast Division, Foothill, Pacific, West LA could be in the same confrontation. The training is the same. The baton would be used. And if it's videotaped, you would see something exactly similar.
Nothing's changed was also the sentiment heard at KJLH, a radio station popular in LA's black community.
This is nothing new to the black community. This is nothing new. A lot of our calls that we received, people are not really surprised. In fact, some are surprised that they're going to jail, period.
Yeah.
Most callers said the relatively light sentences only reinforced their low regard for the justice system.
Actually, my comment is I'm not really surprised about the decision. What I mean by that is what really would have surprised me if they would have sent those cops to jail. I find it up for the maximum term.
Okay, appreciate your call.
Honey, we get more time for that for traffic violations. You pay more for a fine, they have no fine. You see, it's no more we can take it.
Hi, KTLH, your comment, please.
Well, I have always feared the LAPD.
But I mean, have they sent you a message saying that your life isn't worth too much?
Absolutely.
If you're stopped, this is what might happen. Not per se that it can't happen, but it might happen.
That's correct.
Similar feelings were echoed by participants in an anti-gang program.
If anybody else, any regular person would have did it, committed that crime, they wouldn't have got only 2 years. That's not right. I don't think so. Myself, I don't think that's right.
Isn't it different for when cops break the law? Don't they go to, a different type of prison instead of, going to, the pen or something like that?
You think they will?
Yeah, I think so. Don't they, go to, a resort jail or something like that? I mean, it's, nothing... It's not like a penitentiary or anything like that. Yeah.
Despite the cynicism of these youngsters, police officers say they are now forced to be more accountable.
We're definitely being scrutinized more, second-guessed more by both field supervisors, captains at your division you work, and by people up above, in internal affairs and the chief, along with the politicians. A lot of patrol officers are running scared. A lot of younger officers who never used to leave the police department are now looking at other departments to join. It's caused attrition amongst not only the younger officers, but also the older officers who are now retiring at a younger age.
Many say they will compare the prison time for Kuhn and Powell with sentences likely to be handed down to the black defendants who beat motorist Reginald Denny and others during the LA riots. That trial is just getting underway.
There will be a difference. They're not going to just get 2 years. They're going to get more than that.
Lawyers for Kuhn and Powell say they will try to overturn the convictions and the sentences. Judge Davies ordered the two, who are free without bail, to prison beginning September 27th. Next week, the same judge is scheduled to begin proceedings in Rodney King's multi-million-dollar civil suit.
Again, the major story of this Thursday is the budget plan. The House of Representatives is expected to vote on the measure later this evening. It would reduce the deficit by nearly $500 billion over 5 years through tax increases and spending cuts. Democratic leaders are predicting its passage, but were reported to be scrambling for wavering votes. In an apparent move to win conservative votes, Democratic leaders late today pledged to make future budget cuts. Good night, Roger.
Good night, Jim. That's the News Hour for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night with more on the battle of the budget, among other things. I'm Roger Mudd. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the MacNeil Lehrer News Hour has been provided by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by New York Life, yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. And by PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
Video cassettes of the MacNeil Lehrer News Hour are available from PBS Video. Call 1-800-328-PBS-1.
This is PBS.
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer News Hour has been provided